Hey, yo, it's Megamouth, and today in the news, Nintendo recently announced that the Virtual Boy is shockingly coming back as uh, you know, uh, basically part of the Nintendo Online Nintendo Switch experience. The expansion pack's a little bit of a more expensive version of their online system. The Virtual Boy, it was like a famous, spectacular disaster for Nintendo in the about the mid 1990s. The Virtual Boy, I remember actually seeing it at a store called Service Merchandise way back in the day. And at the time, I thought, wow, this is so cool. This is so futuristic. I remember playing a space shooter on it way back then. So I personally thought it was a really neat video game system. However, I will admit, even as a kid way back then, it did give me headaches when I played it on their display unit. But I actually do have, I'm one of the weird ones, I guess. I have some fond memories of the Virtual Boy. So let's see what some of Nintendo's announcement was for the Virtual Boy. Okay, coming out in February 17th. This pinball game, I've actually heard good things about it. It's I don't know that I exactly will end up playing it. I've never played but people that have played the Virtual Boy, I've heard that was actually a really good one. Now, 3D Tetris, I've heard this one was really bad. This is probably just something I'm going to briefly to see how bad it is and never to play again. But for Tetris enthusiasts, it might be a little bit amusing. Killer O'Connor, I think this is another one I actually played in a store once. The 3D effects on this one were really good, especially in the mid-90s. So I actually look forward to playing that one again. Wario Land, I've never been too big into the Wario series, but I've actually heard this one for a Virtual Boy game. It's the most like video game on the system that was the most like fully developed video game in terms of like being a traditional platform or a traditional exploration video game. So I actually think a lot of people like that one. And then I heard this was actually like a Japanese like version of the Virtual Boy. I don't think it ever came to America. So this one would be like a good historical odyssey to go back and play, but it would be really good. Oh yeah, golf. I actually heard more people talk about the golf ball and like the theater in this game than anything else. So I'm sure it's a perfectly fine golf game, but in terms of the overall need to be in 3D on the Virtual Boy, yeah, it's probably not one of the best ones out there. Oh, the Red Alarm. This is what I was playing at Service Merchandise back in the day. And I thought it was like very similar to Steam House in a lot of ways. And ultimately, especially with this like very early 3D graphics nowadays, it's probably not going to be too impressive for most people. I'll definitely look forward to replaying that one myself. And the rewindability, that's going to be nice to have. A lot of the other classic systems have that feature as well. That is going to make the pinball game basically broken though. You get to do all of your mistakes in the pinball game. That's not very nice at all. This is actually going to be a really nice new feature, being able to switch up the controls however you want. It's not usually something I take advantage of and partake of myself, but ultimately, having the more customization features, that's never a bad thing. After the launch throughout 2006. Oh yeah, more so traditional Tetris game. Oh yeah, Zero Racing. This is actually like it just was called that for the Virtual Boy. It was canceled, never came out. And then I guess there's the other one. I have actually seen some other video reviews talking, well not reviews, but other YouTubers talking about it on YouTube. I think a lot of people that are into Virtual Boy are going to be very excited to see that one come out, because that one was one of the greatest unreleased games ever said to exist for the Virtual Boy. And being able to switch colors, I don't really think it's going to be that important. It's kind of like a mostly pointless feature to me. I am going to spend the money to get like the full, headpiece to experience the classic Virtual Boy design. It's going to for me, I guess here we're going with another like Tamagotchi Life or whatever it's called. I really don't know why everyone's so looking forward to that game. It's just like, to me, it seems like a worse version of Animal Crossing. but perhaps I'm wrong about that. Maybe it will end up being a popular game. But ultimately, I think that the Virtual Boy, I am probably one of the very few people in the world that is truly looking forward to that. But I almost consider myself like a video game historian. I like a lot of the old stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. How many people out there are going to look forward to the Virtual Boy? How many people will get like that $100 add on to kind of re experience the Virtual Boy and all of its glory or lack thereof? I'm not quite sure. But ultimately, I, for one, am definitely excited by Nintendo's recent announcements for the Virtual Boy. And in terms of some other interesting things that are in the news here lately, uh, not really that surprising though. Apex Legends, I've never played it myself, but I've heard that's a blood video game that's been out for many years now. A version of it did come out for the Switch One, but a lot of people said that it should not really have come out for the Nintendo Switch One because it just wasn't powerful enough to really run that game. Recently, they did release it when the Switch 2 came out, Switch 2 version, and so apparently, the last season of Apex Legends on the Switch One is, basically coming out now. It looks like it will be, you know, fully vacated from the Switch One library of video games here in the coming months. So, to anyone out there that plays Apex Legends on the Switch One, I guess this will be a disappointment to you, at least if you haven't gotten the Switch 2 yet. I've heard the Switch 2 version is a much more competent version. So, how many people were actually playing the Switch 1 version? I'm not really sure, probably not too many. But ultimately, Apex Legends is moving on from the Switch one of the first games to do so. Kind of makes me think how many other games may make the jump here soon, like Rocket League or perhaps even Fortnite or Fall Guys or any of the other big online multiplayer games. But yeah, Apex Legends is done with the Switch One. This was a story I was really shocked to see. Apparently, Nintendo originally was developing a game basically like a precursor to Splatoon, all the way back on the Nintendo 64 DD. And for those that aren't really video gaming historians, this Nintendo 64 DD was like a disk drive system add on to the Nintendo 64. It was supposed to be the next big thing. At one point, that's kind of how Nintendo was marketing it. And ultimately, it only ever came out in Japan. It was a spectacular failure. Honestly, I would say even far worse than the Virtual Boy. It's said that the Nintendo 64 DD hardware add-on only sold between like 50,000 and 100,000 units in its entire lifetime on the market. It basically sold next to no video games. A lot of video games were supposed to come out on that version of that video game system. Most of them were canceled just because the hardware simply did not sell. And so this was very unexpected to actually hear that a Splatoon, what eventually I guess kind of became Splatoon many years later, was actually started on the Nintendo 64 DD. You know, if you read the article, it was basically like it shared a lot of similarities to what Splatoon became. There were definitely some differences to it, but apparently HAL Laboratories, Satoru Iwata, everybody that was working on it, advising it, kind of funding the development studio on this, kind of a second party development studio back in the day, uh, you know, apparently the development studio wanted to just release it on the Nintendo 64, and Nintendo kept trying to force them to put it on the Nintendo 64 DD. And so ultimately there was a lot of disagreements. The game eventually got canceled, but its spirit kind of lived on, and Nintendo revisited the concept of like a water shooter, well, sort of a water shooter, paint shooter, I guess you could say, with Splatoon many years later. And well, I guess the Nintendo Wii U, which is what Splatoon eventually came out on, it was also kind of a failed system, but 13 million is a whole lot more than like 50,000, 100,000. So ultimately, that concept of a video game survived. It kind of Nintendo circled back around on it, eventually made a game out of it, and now it's one of Nintendo's most successful series. It's super huge in Japan. I love Splatoon 1 and Splatoon 2 myself. I never actually got Splatoon 3. I've heard, mostly good things about it. I guess I just got kind of busy and never played Splatoon 3, but ultimately, yeah, I could highly recommend Splatoon 2, especially on the Nintendo Switch 1. I guess there's probably a way to play it on the Switch 2 now as well, but ultimately, yeah, the Nintendo 64 DD, of all things, that system coming up in the news again was not expected at all. And honestly, it was kind of a leftover relic of the 90s hardware add ons. Um, they never really did work, did they? The Nintendo 64 DD was a failure. The Atari Jaguar CD was a failure. I believe the TurboGrafx 16 had a CD add-on. That was a failure. The Sega 32X, that was a super spectacular failure. The Sega CD, I actually remember that kind of being somewhat of a success in the 90s. I actually knew a few people that had one of those. So I don't really think it was exactly overall success for Sega, and they probably still lost focus as Sega did so much through the early to mid to late 90s. They just went every different direction, and that lack of focus is basically what I would say ultimately killed Sega in terms of being a hardware manufacturer, a platform holder. But ultimately, I would say that these hardware add-ons, there's a reason that they failed. Like, how can you have a video game system and then sell another video game system that has to be used with that first video game system? I mean, strategically, why would you fracture your market like that? I don't know what the video game companies of old were thinking. Nintendo, Sega, Hudson Soft, Atari. What a spectacular mess the 90s was. But, that was an era of experimentation. So we got a lot of good and a lot of bad back in the day. And in terms of video game sales, let's take a look at Japan. The weekly sales is pretty much the best way to get information around the world for how the video game market's doing. The Nintendo Switch 2, some people say it's in a little bit of trouble in North America and Europe and those territories, but in Japan it's still doing magnificently well, still selling about 70,000 a week. This week it sold 72,000. Switch Lite hanging in there with 8,000. PlayStation 5, man, Sony's really struggling here lately. PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, 5,000. Switch 1, the regular version, is 5,000. The Switch OLED's 3,000. PlayStation 5, I guess the regular bare bones version, well, I guess that one's the one that has the disk drive in it, only 2,600. The PlayStation 5 Pro, 1,500. Wow, Sony is falling apart even in their own home territory. And of course, Microsoft just continues to dishonorably shame themselves. 631, the digital edition of the X, 43 of the S, 19 of the full physical X, 18 of the PlayStation 4. PlayStation 4 is hanging in there. You never know, PlayStation 4, you might catch up to the Switch 1 any day now. But in terms of the video game sales, usually people just look at the top 10. Nintendo's still doing fabulously well right now. There's not any PlayStation games at all anywhere in the top 10. In fact, I'm looking down here. The only one I see is the PlayStation 5. The best game they had was number 24. It only sold 1,500 units. Man, maybe the video game, collapse is actually a real thing. I mean, we all remember in North America what happened to the video game industry in the 1980s. But a video game collapse happening in the mid 2020s, I'm starting to wonder if this could actually happen. And since we were just talking about Splatoon 3 hanging in there with 1,500. But in terms of how the video game sales are doing based on the platform, if we look at the top 10, we got 6 for the Nintendo Switch 2, 4 for the Nintendo Switch 1. Ultimately, I think Nintendo is still at least really doing good overall, at least software, in terms of software sales in their own home market. Now, the Final Fantasy VII Remake, that one sold 23,000, so it is number 1. But that's still kind of low overall. It's a little bit depressing, I'm sure, for Square Enix. Mario Kart World in number 2. Animal Crossing New Horizons, because the Switch 2 edition coming out, that shot up there to number 3. The Animal Crossing New Horizons, the Switch 1 version, that's back to number 4. Dynasty Warriors, so we got a third-party game here at number 5. Unlogical, I don't know what that is, Broccoli Studios, is Inugami Korone would say Green Forest, but ultimately that one sold about 8,000. Pokemon Legends EA, that terrible Pokemon game, still sold over 1 million copies in Japan. Japan, why are you shaming yourselves by doing that? But that game sold on the Switch 2 about 7,000. The Switch 1 version sold slightly less, about 200 less, came in number 8. Momotaro Detsu 2, I'm not even going to try the rest of that name. It came in 9th place. And the same version of Switch 1. So an interesting development here. The Switch 2 games are finally starting to sell better than the Switch 1 versions in Japan. So ultimately, Nintendo's doing incredibly well. And Sony is falling apart in the top 30. They only have one game in the top 30. The hardware's barely selling anymore. They're going through some stuff right now. Not as bad as Microsoft with the Xbox, which is almost a shame of their, video game system right now, the way they're treating it. But ultimately, Nintendo, there's good and bad for them in the video game market right now. Sony, they're struggling. Honestly, though, as a Nintendo fan, I'm still pleased overall. I'm enjoying my Switch 2, and it looks like, at least in Japan, they'll continue to do A-OK. So this is the video game news for today. In the Mega News, this is Mega Mouse signing out. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.